The snow had barely melted from last winter when I noticed it again, another set of unfamiliar tracks leading to my property. At first, I thought it was just a delivery driver taking a wrong turn or some neighbors exploring. But as days passed, it became clear that something more deliberate was happening. The HOA had started using my land as an unofficial dumping ground, leaving piles of snow near my cabin, blocking driveways, and generally disrupting my property. Each time I cleared it, they came back, as if testing the limits of what I would tolerate. I had moved to this secluded cabin to escape the chaos of city life. Dreaming of quiet mornings with the sunrise hitting the pine trees just right, the crisp air filling my lungs, and my dog trotting happily along the trails. Instead, I found myself constantly shoveling snow that wasn't mine and dealing with the mounting frustration of an HOA that seemed to believe my property existed only for their convenience. One morning, I arrived to find the gate of my cabin sealed shut. A bright official-looking padlock glinted in the winter sunlight, and a notice from the HOA was stapled to the fence. They claimed it was a safety measure, citing obscure rules about road access and liability. I scanned the surrounding area, my eyes widening as I realized the gravity of their oversight. The only road leading out of the HOA's property, its main street, ran across my land. Without access to my gate, residents were effectively trapped. It was a critical mistake that they had clearly not considered. I walked the perimeter of my property, inspecting the lock and the notice, feeling a mix of disbelief and irritation. The HOA had always overstepped boundaries, but this crossed a line. My mind raced with possibilities. I could report them to the authorities, but past experiences had shown that legal channels were slow and often ineffective when dealing with small but powerful neighborhood associations. No, this time I needed a solution that would make them understand the consequences of their actions immediately. As I contemplated my options, I began to notice something about the terrain. The snow they had dumped all winter, the piles left carelessly at the edge of my land, could be repurposed. Slowly, an idea began to take shape. If I could redirect the snow into a barrier, one that blocked the very road they relied on, perhaps, I could teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget. It wasn't about revenge. It was about asserting control over what was mine. I spent the next few days preparing. Shovels, plows, and careful measurements became my tools. Each pile of snow became part of a larger plan, shaped meticulously to ensure that it created an effective wall without damaging the surrounding property or the environment. It was labor-intensive, but there was a strange satisfaction in seeing the raw elements of winter transform into a statement of ownership and authority by the time I finished. The wall stretched across the road like an immovable barrier, crisp and compacted, impossible to ignore. I stepped back and surveyed the scene, feeling a surge of quiet triumph. The HOA had taken my gate, ignoring the reality that their entire street depended on my land. Now, the situation had reversed. They were the ones trapped, forced to reckon with the consequences of their negligence and arrogance. As cars approached, from the far end, drivers stopping in confusion and frustration, I realized this was more than just a physical blockade. It was a symbol, a statement that property boundaries and personal rights were not to be dismissed lightly. Neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering and pointing, and I felt a strange mix of vindication and responsibility. What I had built was a spectacle, and the HOA had unwittingly created the conditions for their own humiliation. The first official from the HOA finally arrived, clipboard in hand, face red with disbelief. Their confident demeanor faltered as they surveyed the snow wall, their plans and authority literally blocked by my determination and careful planning. Cameras from neighbors and onlookers appeared, and the situation began to attract attention far beyond the quiet neighborhood. It was only a matter of time before this would escalate, and I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation. With the wall standing firm and the road effectively closed, I stepped back and took a deep breath. The winter sun glinted off the compacted snow, highlighting the sheer audacity of what had been accomplished. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control in this ongoing battle with the HOA. They had tried to dominate my property, to make me a passive participant in their endless rules and petty enforcement. And I had turned the tables in the most dramatic way possible. But as satisfying as it was, I knew this was only the beginning. The HOA wouldn't simply walk away. They were organized, persistent, and prone to overreaction. Their next move would be critical, and I had to be ready. The snow wall was more than a barrier. It was a message, a warning that crossed the invisible lines they had so carelessly ignored. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the icy barricade, I paused to reflect on the unfolding situation. What had started as a simple act of winter maintenance had evolved into a full-blown showdown. My property, once just a personal sanctuary, had become a stage for asserting rights and exposing abuses of power. The coming hours and days would determine just how far this confrontation could go, and I felt both apprehension and resolve. The HOA's reaction was unpredictable, but one thing was certain. They had underestimated me, and now the consequences were clear for all to see. The snow wall stood as both a literal and symbolic blockade, forcing them to confront the reality of their oversight. This was the calm before the storm, a tense pause before the next chapter of the conflict would erupt. With no easy resolutions in sight, the morning after the snow wall went up, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers and astonished glances. Drivers slowed, cameras flashed from windows, and the HOA officials arrived in greater numbers. Their frustration barely contained. They paced in front of the barricade, waving clipboards, muttering to each other, and occasionally glancing at me, their expressions a mix of disbelief and mounting irritation. For the first time, their authority felt fragile, and the imbalance of power was clear. Despite the tension, I remained calm. I had anticipated their arrival and the questions that would inevitably follow. This wasn't about aggression. It was about demonstrating that property lines and personal rights were not mere suggestions to be ignored. Each of my neighbors, previously silent witnesses to the HOA's petty overreach, now had a chance to see the situation for themselves. Eyes turned toward me, curiosity mixed with admiration, as I surveyed the scene from my porch. The snow wall stood firm, an immovable statement that could not be dismissed. The HOA attempted several approaches to regain control. They called meetings, sent formal notices, and even threatened legal action. But the physical reality of the barricade was undeniable. Vehicles could not pass, and the main street, dependent entirely on my land, remained closed. Every attempt to circumvent the situation highlighted the short-sightedness of their previous actions. Each step they took only reinforced the fact that they had underestimated both the situation and my resolve. As the hours turned into days, tensions escalated further. Neighbors began to take sides, some siding with the HOA out of habit or fear, others quietly acknowledging the audacity and fairness of my response. Discussions in driveways and over fences grew heated, with the snow wall serving as the central point of the debate. Social media posts circulated, videos recorded on phones, capturing the absurdity of the HOA's predicament. The story began to take on a life of its own, attracting attention far beyond our quiet suburban enclave. Amid the growing chaos, law enforcement became involved. Police officers arrived, carefully assessing the situation. They examined the barricade, the surrounding roads, and the claims from both sides. Their presence added an official weight to the confrontation, but they were neutral, constrained by law rather than HOA rules. While the HOA officials attempted to frame the incident as a legal violation, the reality was undeniable. I had acted within my rights. The road crossing my land belonged to me, and my actions did not obstruct emergency access or violate any statutes. As the day unfolded, the HOA's frustration reached a peak. Meetings held on their behalf yielded no solutions. Their authority challenged in front of witnesses and documented for public scrutiny. Each interaction revealed the limits of their power and the consequences of overreach. What had begun as a simple dispute over snow and gates evolved into a full-scale demonstration of responsibility, property rights, and the repercussions of unchecked authority. Meanwhile, I continued to monitor the barricade and the reactions it elicited. From my porch, I observed drivers turning around in disbelief, neighbors whispering, and HOA representatives pacing back and forth, clipboard in hand. The scene was surreal, a suburban showdown that combined winter's raw materials with the long-standing tension between personal freedom and institutional control. Every glance, every gesture told a story of frustration, astonishment, and reluctant acknowledgement of the balance of power that had shifted. By late afternoon, the first cracks in the HOA's strategy became visible. Their insistence on ignoring property boundaries and overstepping authority had left them vulnerable, and the public nature of the situation amplified the consequences. Local news crews, alerted by videos circulating online, began to arrive, capturing footage of the snow wall, the locked gate, and the faces of the officials struggling to maintain composure. The story transformed from a neighborhood dispute into a viral spectacle, with far-reaching implications for accountability, responsibility, and justice. The turning point came when a senior HOA board member, face red with anger and frustration, finally admitted, albeit reluctantly, that the road had indeed crossed my property. The admission, made in front of cameras and neighbors, shifted the narrative completely. The power dynamic, previously tilted heavily in their favor, was now balanced. The snow wall, a physical manifestation of both resistance and rights, had forced recognition of the mistake and a reconsideration of policy. From that moment onward, the HOA's approach changed. They began negotiations, not as an imposing authority, but as participants in a process where their overreach had been corrected. Discussions focused on access agreements, legal clarity, and future interactions, each step underscored by the visible, undeniable barrier of the snow wall. The neighborhood, once divided by fear and uncertainty, started to see the value of transparency, fairness, and adherence to the law. By the end of the week, a resolution was reached. The gate was reopened under mutually agreed conditions, and the road access was formalized in writing. The snow wall, compacted and pristine, remained as a temporary reminder of the confrontation, a testament to the importance of recognizing property boundaries, respecting neighbors, and exercising authority responsibly. For me, it was a victory not born of malice, but of careful planning, determination, and an unwavering commitment to fairness. As the sun set over the neighborhood, casting golden light on the melting snow, I reflected on the events of the past days. What began as an act of defense had become a lesson in power, responsibility, and the consequences of arrogance. The HOA had learned in a dramatic and highly visible way that their authority had limits, and that those who were willing to stand firm in defense of their rights could effect real change. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal, but the story lingered in the collective memory of residents. Conversations continued, lessons were shared, and the snow wall became a symbol of vigilance, resilience, and the courage to challenge overreach. My cabin, once merely a retreat, had become the stage for a demonstration of justice and accountability. The events captured in photographs, videos, and eyewitness accounts ensured that the message would be remembered long after the snow had melted, and as the final layer of winter's ice gave way to spring, I knew that while the snow wall would eventually disappear, the lesson it represented would remain a clear, undeniable testament to standing up for one's rights, confronting misuse of power, and asserting control over what is rightfully yours.